Okay, so let's go back now to the winter palace of the king, which is in Shushan. Now, the book of Esther is actually the chronology of the between the 6th and 7th chapter of Ezra. For you higher scholars, those who have already accomplished the certificate, is between the 6th and 7th chapter of Ezra. This is a clue to you why it's in the Bible. Clue was be smack right in between, and there is a reason why we are doing Esther first before Ezra. King of Persia is Xerxes or Ahasuerus. And do you know that it took him 4 years to pick a queen? Between Queen Vashti and Queen Esther, 4 years. Because by the time he chose Queen Esther, it was on the 7th year of his reign. So remember this, 7th year of King Ahasuerus. Because when we go back to Ezra, then there will be a mention of the 7th year as well. We are going to introduce 2 more characters. Okay, 2 more characters to the class. Right, so now we're going to Team May. Team May has been waiting for a long, long time to actually introduce Mordecai and Haman to us. We're going to talk about who is this Mordecai and Haman, what is their roles, their conflict, and of course, their political exploits.
Mordecai, the Jews, we call it that way. Okay, and also Haman the Agagite. So basically, Mordecai is Queen Esther's cousin, and he is a palace official, which you can find it from the very beginning, which is presented by Alex's team in Esther chapter 2, verse 21. Okay, and then let's read in Esther chapter 3 first. Sometimes later, King Xerxes promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagites, over all the other nobles, making him the most powerful official in the empire. Verse 2, all the king's officials would bow down before Haman to show him respect whenever he passed by, for so the king had commanded. Special position. Okay, but Mordecai refused to bow down or show him respect. We pause here. So basically, we can see that Haman has a high-ranking officer and also higher position than Mordecai at this point of time. So we can see that there's some conflict between these 2 guys. Okay, one Jews, one basically he's Amalekites. You can see from the very beginning of the book that we have studied before. Okay. 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 1 to 3. Okay, you can see that there's a conflict earlier happened, whereby, just flashback, whereby God has tell Prophet Samuel to just remove the Amalekites. But what happened was King Saul reserved the king of Amalekites. Yeah, remember this. So if you read on in chapter 3, basically, verse 5 to 6, you can see that Haman's, I put it as abolishment campaign begin, because he knows, okay, this guy, I have to get rid of him because he don't like the Jews. Not only him, but also the entire Jew. In chapter 3, verse 8, then Haman approached King Xerxes and said, there is a certain race of people scattered through all the province of your empire who kept themselves separate from everyone else. Their laws are different from those of any other people, and they refuse to obey the law of the king. So it is not in the king's interest to let them live. So, but then this Haman tried to create a story, a rumors. So said to say this, but the king believed him 100%. Whatever information that Haman told him, he believed 100%. Haman's contribution, we put it in bracket here, to the royal treasury, whereby he wants to give something in order for him to persuade the king. But there's a question happening in our chat room. The king did not accept the gift that he wants to give to the king. May has calculated how much is the what we call it, well, the amount, if we follow current currency, 375 tons of silver is worth of 80 million ringgit today. Approval has given to Haman to do whatever he wants, and then the schedule, the plot to get rid of all the Jewish has happened. Point number 4, scheduled to happen March 7 of the next year, which is, you can read in chapter 3, verse 13. I read on very quickly. Dispatches were sent by swift messenger into all the province of the empire, giving the order that all Jews, young and old, including women and children, must be killed, slaughtered, and annihilated on a single day. This was scheduled to happen to March 7 of the next year. You can see that it takes very long time because there is no post, there is no FedEx to send all this, the letter, the decree given by the on behalf of the king by Haman. Yeah, actually, they have posted here. We just want to have some clarity. I mean, how come this Haman can get into this position suddenly? There's no mention about his name. First chapter, second chapter, and suddenly in third chapter, he's suddenly in the position.
Basically, I tell you, you ask me for a biblical explanation, there's no biblical explanation. It's just a narrative. Sometime later, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman Agagite. So he probably was an officer in the army. He knew how to get around. He knew how to bribe his way around. He was even going to bribe the king, paid his way through. Or he could have talked his way through like President Trump. There's no biblical answer. I guess the narrative is such. And Haman only appears here. But the main thing is that Haman is an Agagite. All right, that is the clue here. And that is why the Bible writer writes Haman the Agagite. And why? Because King Agag, I think Rose has shared with you, was a king that God asked King Saul to kill everybody. Genocide, total genocide. God instructed King Saul to do a genocide on the Amalekites. Why? Because the Amalekites were enemies of God. When they came out of Egypt and they were already coming to the promised land, the Amalekites were the ones that actually invaded. The Amalekites are a group of nomadic raiders. They were waiting. And a lot of the others allowed God's people to go by, Moabites and all that. But the Amalekites, no. They invaded and they attacked from behind. So, Ben, you are right. They are doing the backdoor stuff. They attack from behind, who are the children and the old people. And God hated that. The Amalekites are descendants of who? Anybody knows?
From Esau's lineage.
Yes, very good, May. You have done your studies. I love her so much because she does her research so well. Is Esau's grandson. Okay, you can go to Genesis 36:12. Okay? Under Esau. That's why actually God at the end of the day hated Esau. He mentioned it, right? I hate you. Because why? His descendants became the enemies of God's people. Now the question is, did Mordecai reveal his identity before or only just when he was asked to bow down?
I think it should be before the command of Haman. Correct me if I'm wrong. Because in chapter 3, verse 4, they spoke to him day after day, but still he refused to comply with the order. So they spoke to Haman about this. So if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct, since Mordecai had told them he was a Jew.
So what does that prove to you? Was it when he was tested only he said he's a Jew, or did he tell them he was a Jew earlier? Earlier, before the command.
Yes.
What did the rest think? Do you think if he had revealed himself as a Jew in those days, they would have concluded that Esther was a Jew also? Because they knew the relationship between Mordecai and Esther? Yes, you're right, Alinda. Haman figured out after Mordecai's disobedience. Right? He only revealed, furthermore, he had revealed to them that he was a Jew. That means at that point, when the command came in, then only he had no choice but to disclose himself that he was a Jew. If he had revealed himself earlier, Esther, the secret would have been exposed. So that means to say that Mordecai also hid his identity for the longest time. Now this guy Mordecai, he was always sitting at the king's gate there. You notice that throughout the narrative, he's always at the king's gate. What do you think is his occupation? You guys try to go and sit at the palace gate and see. Our Sultan or our Agong's palace gate. You try go and sit there and see what will happen.
Maybe he's a jaga also. He's a guard.
He's probably one of the court officials or something like that.
Yeah.
The palace officials, yeah.
Yes, yes, he was, because only the palace officials were allowed to actually be there. Even though whether he was to protect Esther or not, he would have been chased out. Okay. He was a palace official, maybe a middle rank. You see, sometimes we think that, I think it's been mentioned that the Jews were the lower class society. No, no, or the Jews were the poorer class. No. Don't think so much about Egyptian time. During the Egyptian time, yes, they were slaves, but by this time, during the Persian times, they were rich, and they were still had they were a class of its own. Maybe not high class, but there are higher class, there are middle class. They were not poor. Because why? 70 years of exile in Babylon. Do you remember Jeremiah's promise to them is continue to have babies, continue to marry, continue to do everything that you've been doing. And I tell you, the Jews are like us Asians, you know. Put us in a crisis situation, we make more money. You know, you will multiply and be fruitful, because why? You are a resilient race. So the Jews are a pretty resilient race. That's why even after they come out of Babylon and gone back to Jerusalem, if you read Haggai, the book of Haggai, 2 chapters of it, right? The prophet that was sent to God, to the people after the exile. Haggai was scolding them. Why are you guys building rich homes when the house of God is in ruins? You can go back and read Haggai 1 verse 4. So when they came out of Babylon, they were not poor. Right? We must get this mentality out of it that, oh, they didn't review themselves as Jews just because they were poorer class or they were downcast. No, they were middle at least, or even upper class. But because they had already, the Jews then had assimilated themselves to the Persian. And of course, the Persian king was a very tolerant king. We have read that, isn't it? King Cyrus allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem. And in fact, when we read Ezra, my goodness, the king gave them gold and silver, everything. They were rich people. So don't think of Mordecai just as the security guard, you know. No, he was already an official. That's why he could be walking up and down the king's gate without no issue, and there was no problem for him to even contact with Esther. Okay, so a little bit of that to get the mindset changed. If you actually read the Bible and exegete the Bible, you will find that the Jews were not low class at that time. Okay? They were intelligent, they were rich, and of course, most of all, they had God with them. After that, there was this decree to bow down, but Mordecai refused to bow down. So why be so selective? That means to say, last week we were talking about the fact that, you know, keeping the Sabbath and all the Jewish laws, like food laws and keeping the Sabbath and all that. And we couldn't really conclude whether Esther actually managed to keep all the commandments of the Jewish people. But, you know, it would be very, very hard for her to follow. Same thing as Mordecai. Because if he was working with the king, do you think he can have a Sabbath off? Or write in a letter and say, hey, I'm not going to work on the Sabbath day. Okay, but when it comes to the crux of worship, he stood up. I want you to see this. When it comes to the crux of worship, he was not willing to compromise. We had to say, look, I'm a Jew. And why are the Jews so, concerned about worship being anybody other than God? This one is worship, you know, it's like bowing down, paying homage to Haman. It's like the worshiping. Why were the Jews at that point in time so against bowing down to an idol or to a person? Why? Remember, this is post-exile. Huh? Why?
Commandment. Because of the first commandment.
Julie says because of the first, observe the first commandment. Okay, because of the first commandment, but all along they broke the first commandment like nobody's business. That's why they had to go into exile. So why now suddenly, you know, they are so concerned about this idolatry issue or worshiping another person?
Maybe because of the exile, that's why they are
sort of learn their lesson a bit, and that's why they are, they don't do that anymore.
You are absolutely right, Val. Very good exegesis. Okay, it's because they have come out from the exile and they have learned their lessons. So from that onwards, the Jews never went back to idolatry. Okay, they were much more sensitive than before and all that. But after the exile, the Jews were basically cleansed from that kind of practice. So here is another instance of now repeating or starting back some form of human worship or idol worship. So that's why Mordecai was very against it, and he stood up. Okay, he stood up for it. Okay. Are you saying about Mordecai not bowing down was not about his concern about worship, right? Okay. Because he knew Haman is an idol, did he not bow down to anyone in the first place? All right, good question, Did he not bow down because Haman was the idol guy, or did he not bow down just because he was bowing down in the first place? I think that's your question. So was it because of Haman, or he would have bowed down to somebody else? But Mordecai not bowing down was not about his concern about worship, right? Good question. Let's think about it. If it was somebody else, would he have bowed down?
Oh, he never bowed down to anybody.
May, what do you think?
I think that he not bowing down has nothing to do with the commandments. Two things like if it looks as though he would have bowed down to the king, because otherwise he would have been persecuted as an official of the palace. He would have been, persecuted much earlier if he didn't bow down to the king. Secondly, there's nothing in the Torah that says that you cannot bow down as a point of respect. Because bowing down, because throughout the Bible, there are many times that you actually bow down. For example, in 2 Kings, we learned that Haman actually bowed down to God. But he explained that it was because the king was leaning on his hand. So I don't think that Mordecai did not bow down because of the commandment, but it's more of the history between the Jews and the Aggites rather than a commandment kind of thing.
Okay, so Adamson said the Jews were forbidden to bow to people in authority. So I think it was because it was Haman. It is something to do with Haman's character, maybe. Wow, to risk your life just because of that. My goodness. Stupidity or honor? Again, the question is asked. Right. Mordecai will bow down to the king. Okay, so Mordecai will bow down to the king. Now, bowing and paying homage are two different things also. Okay, is bowing down and just nodding your head, perhaps. Right. Paying homage will be how? Maybe I should show you a picture. This is paying homage and bowing down. Oh, I see May's face. Okay, yeah. Right. So there's the action that maybe the English wording is a little bit different from the Hebrew. Bowing and paying homage. That's what my version has. What about the others?
Common one is bow down or pay homage. So there are two actions there. It's not it's two things there. I believe it's probably like the picture that they are going to prostrate themselves before whoever that person is.
Okay, so there's some arguments here and there, right? Some believe it's a worship. Some bowing down is not just because of Haman or not because of the first commandment, but because of an issue of personality. Good. All right, good. Now let's read further, because when we don't have the answer to the question, we don't try to extrapolate, right? And form our own presuppositions, but we just continue to read the Bible and see whether we can find the answer. Is that okay? So very good feedback here. Let's go now to it. Yes?
I have a question. I mean, the fourth commandment, it says that you cannot bow down to graven images. So does that mean that you can bow down to a human being?
Okay, the second commandment. All right. Okay, does it mean you can bow down? Of course, like you said, the Torah said you cannot, there's no such, the 10 Commandments doesn't say bow down to people. It's wrong, right? Then you need to, we need to actually go back into history. When they do this kind of action, what does it indicate? Okay? When they do the bowing and the paying homage, doing those, the culture at that time, what was the indication? Remember, kings were also worshipped as deities. Perhaps we can find the answer without forming our own conclusions. Tim Val, okay, Tim Val. Describe Esther's mission, heroic or duty bound. Just describe her mission. Don't have to say what the full story.
Straight away jump into the mission itself, right? So basically, Esther's mission is basically to save the people, and it was actually Mordecai's request. So if you look at the second column on the lighter purple, Mordecai reminded Esther her purpose. So and also sort of alerted Esther that without her, there will also still be deliverance from God. Even though if you ignore to actually go forward to actually meet the king and talk about saving the people of the Jews from Haman's persecution. So, and then Esther literally asked for fasting, and this is actually an act of submission to the Lord for courage and bravery and God's intervention. Then literally she can sort of go and forward and meet before the king.
Okay, so everybody go to Esther chapter 4. So Esther chapter 4 was Mordecai feeling very distressed. Could it be distress? Could it be remorse because of personality clash? Now Haman wants to kill all the Jews. Haman took the opportunity to kill all the Jews. So here is Mordecai so distressed that in verse 1 of chapter 4, verse 1, he becomes so distressed that he tears his garments and puts sackcloth on and ashes, and he went out into the city crying out in the loud and bitter voice. So he went, he was like, this is the way people do practice their remorse or their distress, is putting on sackcloth, like mourning or like a funeral, and he went out to the city in a loud and bitter voice. But he went no further than the king's gate because nobody is allowed. So even though he had access to the king's gate on a daily basis, but in this situation, because he was in a different clothing, he was not allowed. So at this point in time, Esther doesn't know what's happening because Esther was enjoying the spas in the palace, right? So didn't know what was happening to the Jewish people and all that. But once the edict went out, there was a 1-year edict. Okay, it was a 1-year lapse between the actual command as well as the actual act. So the king's edict means the law. It's already law. Those days you don't need parliament to pass law. The king just have to issue it and then sign it and put the stamp. Don't even sign, put the stamp on it. So it was already law, and all the Jews already knew what was happening. Okay, they were already mourning and fasting and all that. Esther didn't know what was happening. Okay. Then somebody came and told her, hey, your dad is, something happened to your dad, you know, he's gone a bit crazy. So then the message was conveyed to her that the Jews were going to be exterminated. Every one of them, okay, in all the province, not only in Shushan, all. What was Esther's response?
The eunuch actually replied to Esther and says that this is what happened. And so Mordecai actually asked Esther to do something about it, right? To actually sort of like seek help. So basically, Mordecai sort of asked Esther to go to the king and ask for mercy to actually remove the decree or something like that for the destruction of Jews.
Okay, that's easy enough. Go and tell your husband, okay? Go and tell your husband, do cancel the law.
She sort of replies, says, oh, the king didn't need me for 30 days already. I cannot meet the king without summon, even though I'm a queen. And then Mordecai reminded her and says that, well, if you don't do it, your family will be destructed. You will have your entire family killed. and at the same time that if you don't do it, God will still deliver somehow or rather, not with you, but with someone else, or maybe with some other ways as well. Eventually, she says, "Oh, fast for me for 3 days without drinks or food or whatsoever not, then I will meet the king. So if I perish, I perish."
Okay, so that was Esther's first response of what? When she first responded.
Very formality, very human, very a very good queen.
We need to understand the relationship of a king and a queen and our husband and wives at this time. And there is a law that says it's only when the king invites you, only can you go into his presence. So we can also understand the nature of Esther in this way. Right? She was basically a very obedient wife, you would say, queen. She knew her place. And if not, if the king could, and she probably knew how eccentric the husband was. He will go into, if you went in and he had a bad time, he probably asked to chop off her head. So this person will be put to death unless the king extends to him the gold scepter, permitting him to be spared. Let's understand the culture at that time. And now I had not even been invited to the king for 30 days. A bit of self-centeredness, perhaps, because she was comfortably in the palace. And then Mordecai had to reply with her this: "If you remain completely silent at this time," strange, isn't it? Because he had asked her to be silent all the time. He had asked her to live in silence all this while. Now he is coming to tell her, "Hey, look, now you better go and tell you're a Jew." And deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place. You and your father's house will perish. Who is her father's house?
Mordecai.
Yeah. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time. I think people miss out this verse so much. But who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as. What did she do? See, you can see some strong character coming out from here.
So she mentioned that she needs fasting, and she asked the entire Jews to actually fasted for 3 days, including herself and the servants.
Okay.
And then after that, on the third day itself, on the fourth day itself, then he will meet the king, irregardless whether the king summoned her or not.
So was she willing to do her task or not, her mission or not?
Yes.
Yes, she was willing to do her mission. But she asked for support, isn't it? She asked all the Jews who are found in Susa, there are probably a few Jews there, asked them not to eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. It doesn't talk about praying, it just talks about fasting. Why didn't mention prayer?
Perhaps they've already been praying.
Actually, they've already been praying and fasting as well. So now there's a special fast for 3 days. And why do you think that Esther asked for this thing called fast? I like that. Heartfully express petition to God. But God is not mentioned in the book. It's an earnest urgency, but Angela said that. Urgency, earnest petition. But God is not mentioned in the book. Anyway, that's why we say that even if the mention of God is not in the book, we know that these people are believers of God. That whatever they do, whether they're in the Persian palace or whatever, you may think, oh, look, she's a Persian queen, you know, she's so immoral and all that. But she understood relationship with God. She understood the duty, and she understood what she had to do in this kind of circumstances, and that was to fast. And yes, implied that they do pray as well. And the question I like to leave you guys is basically this. This was a question, or this was a statement posed to Esther. And who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Who knows that you have come to your position at a time like this? Who knows you are placed into your family at a time like this? Who knows you are placed in your office at a time like this? Who knows if you are placed in Malaysia at a time like this? And who knows if you are placed in America for a time like this? Every one of us will have this kind of situation come across to us. There will be a Mordecai that will come and remind us that whatever situation we may be in, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, friendly, unfriendly, hostile, unhostile, that there is a purpose for us to be where we are today. And let us continue to look for that purpose. And let us be ready when God calls us to do something for Him, to stand up for Him, like what Esther did, even at the expense of her own.